Boom, 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 boom for the second time tonight. Apologies. So, yes, I changed the key for the stream, and I was actually just streaming and talking. There's actually a video on my channel, and some people were watching it, but the people that I was watching this for, it wasn't working, and now I've figured out why. So, hopefully now we should have a proper boom. It's funny, I was talking to everyone, and everyone's like, what is he doing? Um, it was very disconcerting. I went for about 5 minutes. So anyway, indeed, as Duncan said earlier, this is not a technical issue. It's real life. Real life is a technical issue. You could probably start a religion around that and get tax-free donations. Yes, by the way, also the JVlog, CN, thank you for that. Throwing peanuts is always appreciated here. Indeed, it is. Sorry to keep you all waiting. That was yes, that was very meta. I actually watched Tenet yesterday. I regret it. I was completely confused the entire time. Yeah, I don't know. I feel a little bit now like I felt like watching Tenet, like with these settings, but we got it going. It's great to see everybody here. So many people here. Great to see so many people join for 2.5 Oyajis last night. As I was just saying, kind of to myself and with a few people who noticed in their subscriptions. Yeah, 2.5 Oyajis is funny. It just it works really well. We can't do it every week because to do it Saturday and Sunday just means it's too much. But it is funny how it just works really well when we get back together. The conversation, the dynamic is always the same. A lot of people seem to enjoy it, and we do have a couple of more episodes planned, so look forward to that. Lots of stuff going on, lots of news topics, which is why it's not good to start 10 minutes late. But of course, the most important thing is to say hello to everybody here first. You can see my settings are a little bit different this time. That's obviously why everything got messed up. My camera is a little bit more zoomed out. I hope you're hearing me okay. Anyway, let's get in. There's Odie Jr. booming right away. We've got Ben Duncan needs a boom fix. We bring the boom. Andrea Mulboy, congratulations. I believe daylight saving ending in Australia, and that should bring you into a slightly better time zone for us. So yeah, for you people on the east coast of Australia, 1 hour apart from Tokyo now. We've got the JVlog, salutations. Yes, indeed. Thank you for the donation. Very much appreciated. We've got a decent time for the live stream. That's right. Quinn Rankett, hello. We've got, make sure I'm not missing anybody. Yasa, good to see Yasa. Trapped in a landslide, no escape from technology. That's exactly what's happening. Erin is here. She's always in the right place. I was in the wrong place, but good to have you with the moderator, Spanner. Fully working, so look out. Thanks again, by the way. I'm going to obviously thank again later on in the show, but she's done a bunch of short videos, which is fun. It's actually fun to have them packaged up like that, and I very much appreciate that, as well as the moderator stuff. So thank you, Erin. Good to see you there. We've got who else we got here? Tim the Asian Ink. There's a boom. Definitely a boom now. I was booming in the wrong place. I was booming somewhere else. I was booming on the wrong stream key. I'm now booming in the correct place. So good to see you. Lysander 45. This is good timing because you reached the end of your classes for today. So good timing indeed. Good to have you here. Who else we got? Remember, say hello. It's always nice to see you, Zinni. We've got Kang and Kodos. Good to see you. Late to my own show. I was a little bit late to the wrong show, and then I was at the right show. So yes. Hey, it's part of the suspense. It's a feature of the show. You never know if I'm going to make it here without a technical issue. Tim the Asian Ink, behave. We've got Brad F. Good to see you. The cool people were in the other stream. Yeah. Hopefully they're going to find that. Well, it was pretty clear, and the people who were watching, that I was very confused. In fact, you may want to watch after this, me being confused on the other stream. So yeah, hopefully people, including Tai Nakamura, who was on the other one, will find their way in here. If you're not here already, just go catching up. Lots of peanuts flying. It's like a peanut war zone, I imagine, here while I was looking to start up. We've got PB, roasted peanuts and fresh butter. Now it's getting pretty trollish now. I'm getting uncomfortable. Thank you. We've got Gilded Nerd. Sergeant Bilko, good to see Sergeant Bilko. People piling in, actually. Yeah, so sorry to keep all of you guys confused and waiting as I did. Who else in here? We've got PB, Aaron, Devoid. Good to see Devoid again. Good morning from Arizona. 2 days in a row. I'm impressed. You're an early riser, and I respect that. Steve Miller, also from last night. Excellent to have you back. The voice of America, Captain America of radio, if you ask me. Or I guess not strictly. Actually, it's mostly web stuff now, isn't it? But still great to have you, Steve Miller. Good to see you there. Early in the morning for you. Although East Coast now, right? So definitely a bit more manageable. Who else we got in here? So many people. Listeo, good to see you. Papa Power, big boom icon. Love the big boom icon. Thank you. When I am late, you get more sleep. Thank you. For people who wake up. Tokyo 503, good to see you. Maddie, you made it in time. I was late. I hope Tai Nakamura makes it. I kind of feel like I should go and leave a comment over there, but hopefully people will see it here and people will figure out that there was a disastrous problem. Remember, at any time during the show, if you're free to like or subscribe. That stuff helps the channel, and we're trying to run the channel well at the moment, so I do appreciate that. It is 10:45, so having gone through super fast, there's lots of things to talk about tonight. Some water there. All of the stress and nervousness of having technical issues once again. I guess this is the thing with bouncing, using the same software for a different show, is that it can do that. I thought I got it perfect, but who knows? The butter emoji, did it work? It did. Look at that. Andrea Moboy. It was funny. It was being censored on 2.5 Oyajis, but it looks like I didn't even do it. Maybe Aaron did it, but yeah. Looks like it is indeed. I see the butter emoji is working. Perhaps. I suppose be careful. It might get taken away again, but still good to see it there. And yeah, let's jump in. So much to talk about. So little time as always. First interesting thing that happened was I think this is the short version, and there was a long version of this. Oh, this is the long version. Let me show you the short version. An interesting thing happened in the Japanese press. So you may remember months. I don't want to talk about the Olympics anymore. I mean, I think it's dumb that they're having it, but fine, do it well, and let's just wait for it to happen in July. I do not want to talk about it every week, but every week something interesting happens, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is what an interesting thing happened with the Olympics yesterday. Several interesting things happened, but I'm just going to focus on one. You might recall earlier, like about a year ago, the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, the FCCJ, which has a newsletter read by about 30 people, put on the cover of their, little basically press correspondence journalist newsletter, sort of a parody of the Olympic, rings logo with COVID-19 sort of virus-looking circles. Pointing out in the great tradition of political cartoons, the reality of issues facing the Olympics. The Tokyo Olympic Committee, a taxpayer-funded, organization responsible for the Olympics, was outraged at the association of the way that they put a political sort of cartoon on their cover showing the Olympic logo as a COVID-19 virus, and demanded that the FCCJ apologize and retract the cover and so on, and apologize. And of course, not being like the press club, not being like the Japanese press club, cowed and at the mercy of the Japanese political masters of the media, and fearing and cowering at not wanting to offend them. Of course, the foreign press, the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, of course, immediately stood up and apologized profusely and retracted. And apparently, doing so pissed off some members enough that they actually quit the organization and talked about what a gutless for an organization that's actually fighting, trying to justify entry into press conferences that they are sometimes barred from on the basis that they are true accountable media and Japanese media isn't. They behaved like a pretty Keisha club, a pretty Japanese press club, sort of do as they're told by the government kind of press org. So the irony, that was not lost on many people. Why do I bring that up? This was like a year ago. Well, what's been happening in recent months is there've been the endless stream of entertaining scandals going from the women hold up meetings to the let's dress a fat woman up as a pig. All of these wonderful leaks and whatever. The main news organization, the main tabloid that's been leaking most of these, that's been catching the scoops on these stories, has been the Shukan Bunshin, which is the weekly Bunshin, the Sentence Spring, I suppose you could call it, and they are one of the weekly magazines in Japan that are basically your tabloid newspapers. They've got a lot of investigative journalists who look for scandals. They follow around celebrities and wait for them to be having affairs and catching photos of them and publish rumors about the royal family and generally sort of scandal rags. But they've just found a never-ending stream of material. And the thing is that they are the ones that often come up with scandals which the mainstream press are too scared to print. But when it comes out in the tabloids, if there's something to it, then it will get picked up by the mainstream media. So in a way, the whole press thing in Japan actually relies on these tabloid rags, to actually occasionally get scoops, given that mainstream media just doesn't have that capability or willingness. So when it came out during this week, an interesting story, one of a series of scoops. I mean, they're the ones who leaked the whole Olympic. They leaked the whole Mori's comments. So the Mori's comments actually wasn't them, but there are a bunch of other things. They found out that the original plan for the Olympic opening ceremony, some of you may know that the movie Akira, the original manga Akira, and then the movie Akira actually referenced that apparently written in the 1980s, they had said that the 2020 Olympics had been held in Tokyo, when they talk about the post-apocalyptic future world of Akira. And there was an idea for the original opening ceremony to actually recreate, to do a bit of a tribute to Akira, actually have that cool motorbike that they have in it, and do a big scene of the Akira motorbike going around sort of a post-apocalyptic sort of Tokyo kind of a scene, which would have been hella cool. And this got leaked, and that this had been one of the original plans, which was cast aside. And actually, most of the reaction online was favorable. It was like, wow, that would have been much better. How did they go from that to dressing a woman up as a pig? Apparently, the Olympic Committee, once again, however, discovering that once again, someone, some information had leaked from their confidential plans, and, they kept ruining everything with unrelenting criticism of the Olympics and leaking secret and confidential information. They put out a message saying that the Shukan Bunshin, this tabloid, should not only cancel all issues of the latest edition, which contains this confidential information about the original plans for the opening ceremony, but they should actually also recall all of the sold episodes and whatever, and apologize to them for investigating and journalisting them. And it's kind of funny because, like I say, there is a stereotype that the international press is actually quite good at holding Japanese political power accountable, and Japanese media is cowed, and this is why Japan does so lowly in the press freedom rankings. That said, these tabloids are a slightly different beast. These are the scandal rags, and so they're a bit more fearless. However, when the Tokyo Olympic Committee said, take it down, not acceptable, the Shukan Bunshin actually immediately the same day posted at first a short and then an extended editorial giving their response to the Tokyo Olympic Committee on what they thought. And it's 2 paragraphs, and it's actually such a good response. I want to actually share the Japanese with you. So this is from the Shukan Bunshin site, from the editorial board. They did an extended one. But for example, talking about the problems that they are wasting huge amounts of taxpayer money, inappropriate management practices, political, corruption, humiliating use of, portrayals of people and so on, and all of the other problems. They believe that they have a public duty to hold the Olympics accountable. And that the idea that there's a strong public interest in them continuing to report and to hold the public, to hold the Olympic Committee accountable, and the idea that they can block press freedom using threats of copyright action or interference with business is ridiculous, given the role of their business. But then the second paragraph is what I really love. So it basically says, to go to a publication. And by the way, you have to think, Japanese, the word order is different, and they layer a lot on here, so you sort of have to imagine Yoda saying this. I won't do the Yoda voice, but let me go through, because it's hard to translate. It piles on. They don't actually swear, but they're very direct and appropriate. So they say, the extremely out of order, request for recall and cancellation of sales of your magazine that is the current position of the Olympic Committee. This coming from a taxpayer-funded organization of huge public interest and importance, this is completely out of order as far as we see it. This is an absolutely inappropriate request, and we will absolutely continue what we are doing, the way that we are doing it. That's their response. It's basically a huge fuck you to the Olympic Committee for telling them to recall their publication, which really shows up the FCCJ, and actually good on them. I mean, they've got a bunch of scoops that have caused Mori to resign, that have caused they've been speaking truth to power, actually, and this is the role of the tabloids. I mean, yes, They have booby pages. They have, I don't know if they still do this, but they definitely used to always have that. They're, kind of back in the 1950s. They're a bit of madmen in terms of the sort of gender stuff, but, they play a role. There's a lot of sleazy journalism, a lot of made-up stuff, a lot of libelous stuff, but they've been actually hitting it out of the park with the Olympic stuff, and this is just another case. And the fact that this isn't the Beijing Olympics, this isn't the we will have all the journalists arrested who are appropriately covering us. This is Japan, supposedly. The fact that and not only that, but the people calling for the cancellation are people who Seiko Hashimoto, a recently retired politician, minister for the Olympics. In a taxpayer-funded organization calling for the media to censor coverage of them screwing up all the time. They said, screw yourselves, and it was wonderful. I didn't actually do the Yoda thing at all. I actually did just translate it on the fly normally. But yeah, they did an extended explanation of that, but I thought that was actually glorious. I mean, it really was. In so many words, it was a screw you and the horse that you rode in on to the government. And congratulations to Shukan Bunshin. And so, of course, I share this in English with a link to that article. And as always happens with any tweet I do that actually takes off and gets reshared and is popular, I misspelled Shukan Bunshin as Shunkan Bunshin. I put like an in on the end of everything somehow in my head. So it's always, why is it that every tweet that actually catches on that I do has spelling mistakes? I think that's life. What can you do? But that's the first story that I have tonight. Shukan Bunshin telling the Shukan Bunshin telling the Tokyo Olympic Committee to stick it where it don't shine. Back into the comments. How are we doing here? Can we get the likes up to 40? Aaron, yeah, you pushed them along there. Looks like butter is free. People can run wild with the butter. So there you go. I don't know what happened there. I did not change anything for that setting, but Alrak 299, good to see you. Good evening to everybody. Oh, and as Alrak just did, if you type my name, if you say my name, you say my name either with the @ mark or even not with the @ mark. As you can see, it flashes orange, and that makes it stand out to me. And if you've got a question or a comment that you want to actually address to me, I'm more likely to notice it that way. So do what Alrak 299 just did, and be cool. Carolina D from Osaka, good to have you with us. Tough time in Osaka. We're going to get to that in a moment, but hope you're staying well, and excellent to have you with us in the chat there. Who else we got in here? We've got any other new Budley Salterton. Good to have you with us. And yes, I did in another comment mention how somebody was offended that they were actually giving the when they were blocking students and people on business visas coming into Japan, but they were just letting Olympic athletes walk on through and not even having to do proper quarantine when they come into Japan. Although they will be asked to stay in the Olympic Village. I pointed out, yeah, they're also giving them 150,000 free condoms, as we've talked about previously. To which the person who I was responding to became immediately confused and asked each. And come to think of it, I don't know, it's possible, but yes, that is a thing. Ebon Legend, hi from Saitama, good to have Ebon Legend from Saitama in the chat, good to have you with us. Next topic, this was a doozy. So the World Economic Forum in Davos, where basically the... if you're a conspiracy theorist, the cabal that controls, this is where Colonel Sanders runs the world from, I believe, but it's basically rich people and politicians just talking about, matters of economics and governance and so on. And apparently one of the economic papers that was commissioned for the latest Davos report was a survey of 152 countries, I believe. On the for the Global Gender Gap Report 2021, and Japan was featured in this among, I believe it was 150 countries. And you know what? I should have linked to just a summary. The press release will show it. But in any case, Japan came out on the overall ranking, 156 indexed countries, and this is indexed based on various factors to measure gender equality, for example, access to education, access to medical care and whatnot. It's also based upon things like economic representation in leadership of economic positions in large companies, the judiciary, political representation, equality of political representation. And as seems to happen with these things, the Nordic countries got the top few spots. I think New Zealand did pretty well. They got like 4th. Um, and then as you go down the list, out of 156 countries, you head down towards, I believe, 111. You get to start getting to countries like Saudi Arabia. Which only just recently allowed women to drive. And then you go down 9 positions behind Saudi Arabia and you get to Japan at position 120 out of the ranking, the lowest in the developed OECD nations that were listed in the report. Mainly based on Japan's less than something like 10% representation in parliament, and even worse representation among leaders of executives in Japanese companies. So yeah, it's funny. I mean, and the thing that frustrates me the most about this is that you could say that, okay, it takes time, arguably, for companies to get women. Even when a company decides, okay, we're going to have 30% board members or 30% executives be women or whatever. For when companies do not even have career paths to put people in the running for those positions, you can't just suddenly take people that you've told to be tea ladies for 30 years and make them the CEO. You actually have to put people on career tracks for that, and there's a buffer time to allow for that. And I'm actually aware that Keidan Ren and a lot of companies in Japan are sincerely actually trying to foster. And the thing is, it's not even that. You also have to not make it so that your best talent in terms of women don't feel pressured to quit when they get married or when they have kids, and all sorts of things to be able to get those numbers in the leadership of companies. So I kind of understand that that is a work in progress, and some companies are making an effort, although some are definitely not. But this is something where Japan, whereas America and European countries and so on really started these efforts in the 60s and 70s. Japan is only just starting these efforts, and they take a long time from the seeding to show through. So really lagging behind, and not even not easy to address. Politics, however, is a different thing. Under Japan's political system, in America and UK, they have electoral systems where basically, you'll just have your local representative. Your country will be divided up into lots of districts, and you'll vote for who you want to have represent your district. And the thing about that first past the post, whoever gets first to win in every area, is that it means that it could be 10% of the population support communists. It could be that 5% of the population support environmental radicals. It could be that 10%, 15% support a feminist party or whatever. But it's basically the party that the person who gets that 50% of the votes in every location is the one that gets represented. And it means that as a result, this is why you end up with a two-party system in countries that have systems like that. Even if a woman comes a close second in every place in the whole country, it's like the third-party candidates as well in America. They never win. In fact, sometimes they'll actually get large chunks of the votes, but no actual seats or no actual, electoral college votes. And Japan has that. Half of the system in Japan is district-based representation, although they do make it a little bit better than that. That Japan system is kind of complex. Rather than having a bunch of small districts with all this sort of gerrymandering to make sure that, there's definitely gerrymandering. But one thing they did to counter the gerrymandering that was a huge problem in Japan was they actually have these enormous districts that are combined, which basically will have multiple, sometimes 5 or 6 representatives, and it'll be the first 5 or 6 people to win. So it's common in places like Tokyo that you'll actually have, a right-wing LDP, as well as a communist, both be elected from the same district and go to represent in parliament, that's one way that there's more representation. However, that is still a challenge, I suppose, that you still have this problem that you can't guarantee the number or control the number of women that get elected as a result. However, there is another thing. Japan has the same sort of electoral system that Germany and New Zealand has, a mixed member proportional representation system, which means that you vote not only for the person who's representing your district, but also the party that you just want to have, that you want to see in power in parliament. And those parties basically get a list of names that they can just choose whatever names that they like, and those people basically, if their representatives fall short of the percentage of seats that they have in parliament, and there are seats that are set aside specifically for the proportional representation purpose, you can actually put Krusty the Clown on your list, on your party list of people. They are ranked according and basically based on the percentage of votes that your party gets, they'll go and fill them. But any party can decide to make the first 15 candidates on their party list women. They can actually decide tomorrow, they can snap their fingers and they can increase the participation of women in parliament, probably as much as up to 30%. However, Japan is lagging behind 10%. And even though Abe was talking about womenomics, and we talked about this for a long time, how, Abe had all these initiatives to try to promote, diversity and equality and inclusion of women in the economy and so on. The fact that the party which he leads, that's been leading this, the LDP, has the second lowest. I believe the lowest is actually the Buddhist not supposed to call it Buddhist because you're not supposed to have religious parties in Japan, but the Komeito party, that's the ally, the parliamentary partner of the LDP, those two parties that are in government that have supposedly been campaigning on that they are going to improve equality for women, are actually have the lowest representation of women, and it's something which they can decide. They don't even have to be, given that they get a high number of votes in the proportional representation votes, they just have to fill their list with women, just find women, to put on their list. And they don't do it. So it's one of these things. It's frustrating that, Japan is failing at this, and there are things that it can do to improve it right away. There are things which are harder to fix, but but the fact that the end result of this is that overall Saudi Arabia is coming out better than Japan at gender equality. I mean, you have a problem on your gender equality when, countries where, women are not, again, I'm not up with the latest rules in Saudi Arabia, and I know that there has been liberalization, but at least my understanding was that, the idea of women going out alone in public or driving or, being in the presence of a man without a family member present or something like that, being arrestable and, corporal punishable things. That's where Japan is, obviously not for the same reasons, but it puts things in perspective that Japan has a long way to go. And, it's a good thing. It got lots of local Japan coverage, and a lot of critical commentators in Japan have pointed out that, Japan is just doing garbage on this. And it's something, and you know what? If they don't care, they don't care. But, they've proclaimed to care about this issue. The government's actually explicitly made it. Abe made it a target, longest serving prime minister since World War II. Made it like a platform that he was going to improve this, and he had the opportunity to do it, and this is the result. So, again, Japan deserves criticism for this. This is a legit thing. So that's another thing that's happening in Japan. And, hopefully this is external embarrassment like this is something which can prompt action, and so we'll see. But, there again, it shines a really strong light on how bad Japan is failing at this. Back into the comments. I don't see. I realized that was getting a little bit kind of politics description at times. So we'll see. PB, China, Myanmar, and Venezuela rated higher than Japan. A bit of a head scratcher. This one. Well, it's not really a head scratcher. If the criteria that it was measuring by. Japan, certainly performs badly at representation in business and government. I don't know. I mean, the thing with Myanmar is that, they actually incredibly ethnically diverse, and they actually have sort of guaranteed representation for different groups. I mean, you're right. The military, I suppose, I don't. They wouldn't be highly represented there, I'm guessing. But China as well, by the way. I mean, China has a, of course, no real democracy, but they do have a Congress of people who rubber stamp, including Xi Jinping, lifetime dictatorship authorization with a constitutional amendment recently. I mean, when people, obviously, when you don't have a real democracy and you just have a bunch of representatives, it's like Miss World contest or something. It's just a bunch of people that are representing their districts, but are there to rubber stamp whatever the party wants them to do. Yeah, they've got diverse representation. I mean, China has problems, but as I understand, actual gender representation has never actually been one of them. It's something socialist countries do okay. Japan is definitely struggling with that. Andrea Mobile, hopefully the Olympic Committee are prepared for the butter needs of all the athletes. Well, if you're an athlete coming to the Olympics, bring your own butter is my suggestion. Again, you don't want to be waiting in a queue. I'd hate to see super spreader events in front of butter shops. Let's put it that way. Yes. Anyway, next topic. There's the Bernstein. This was an interesting one. This came out just this evening. There's a survey of domestic violence in Japan, and it grabbed attention that 26% of women say that they have faced domestic violence from a spouse. It's an alarmingly high number, but it's a quarter. I mean, it's an alarmingly high number. But also what stood out to me, and I didn't expect to see, I didn't expect 26% responding that they've been beaten up by their husbands. Or by at least women being beaten up by a male spouse. I mean, nowadays we're recognizing LGBT marriages as well, but there's also a number that 18% of men claim to have also suffered domestic violence at the hands of their spouse. So actually in both directions, it is certainly a concern given the current situation as well with COVID and people being, the stress that's putting people under as well. But that's an alarmingly high number in both. And in most cases, both cases, women are less likely than men to consult. So women didn't consult with anybody, 41.6%, men 57%. I've actually heard of this. Israel actually apparently does have an organized, structure for men who suffer violence at home. I don't know of any other country that has that, but it's kind of for a country that puts emphasis on masculinity and the association of that, of not, there's some very outdated thinking about gender roles, which I suppose this would make it challenging for men. But both numbers are of course unacceptable. I suspect a big part of this is that it's not so much that these are worsening problems so much as people are becoming more open and changing their expectations about sharing them. I mean, certainly these things in any country, not just Japan, go vastly underreported. And that's the first thing, like domestic, what people might consider to be domestic violence and so on. But certainly the willingness to report and to respond on surveys, and it highlights again a problem. And this goes into, it paints kind of a dark picture, I guess, if you follow it on from the last story about gender equality. But you can't start to address these problems, including these are not easy problems to solve either, and they entail things like changing social attitudes and education. And those are structural things which take a long time to do. So the first thing is the awareness of it, and it's good to see that starts to be able to happen when this comes out. But those are alarming numbers. So that's it'll be interesting to see if there's any reaction to it. But the survey, by the way, this was done by the Cabinet Office. This is done by the government. It is funny as well that technically it's not like Japanese. You can't express the concept of domestic violence. Katena boroku, you can actually say. But it's so sensitive to say the idea of at-home domestic violence, boroku, to say that. They kind of soften it and hide and obfuscate it by deliberately putting it into katakana and making it a borrowed word, which probably a lot of elderly people wouldn't get. But this is it. It's kind of like people might feel like it's a little bit too shocking to say domestic violence in Japanese, so they soften it for the survey purposes. And it is there is a shortened word DV. When people say DV, you might think of it as the licensed driver center or whatever. But in Japanese it means getting beaten up by your spouse. But this is a thing. So that is an interesting survey. Back into the comments, Brad F. When you did your MBA in Japan, Japanese portion of the group was 75% female. Females are the key to globalization. Well, that certainly is a thing. And there are, certainly my experience of working in international companies is that women go there because they presume that they have career opportunities there that they would not have in traditional Japanese companies. I suspect that's changing, but it's also another reason why women, go and seek higher education as well. And in a way that they can, when they're working in companies where they realize that because of their gender, they're in a dead-end sort of a role, that actually motivates. And because I work in the legal profession, I, know a lot of women who, in these roles who didn't start out as lawyers actually, but partway through they were working within legal teams and realized if they studied and got qualifications and were working in international companies that they could advance themselves. So those opportunities are increasing, and I think there's a recognition that Japanese companies are missing out on talent that foreign companies are getting. But I think you're right in terms of the internationalization thing. If the international companies are getting talent and showing up, the Japanese companies are losing because they're actually not recognizing the talent that they have or supporting their development. I think you're absolutely right. The J-Vlog, does your cat waking you up at 3 o'clock count as DV? I do not think that it does, but yeah. Shubus, good to have Shubus here as last night as well. Good to have the Panama representative here in the comments, and nothing else there. So I'm going to jump ahead to the next story because we are not getting through this fast enough. Let's see. Oh, this was interesting. Congratulations, anyone in New York City. I don't know if anyone is this actually it's New York State, I believe, and New Jersey. Well, apparently Japan has a consulate. It's understandable given the number of Japanese who live in New York and New Jersey. The Japanese consulate apparently sent an email to Japanese residents of these states, which are going through legalization of recreational use of marijuana. And yeah, they're actually, and not only are they legalizing recreational use, I'm not exactly sure the details of the legalization there, the specifics, but apparently, at least recreational use, you will no longer be, there's no longer, criminal offense. And in fact, anyone who has been convicted for possession of small amounts of marijuana is actually going to have their records expunged. So, New York is actually, it's more or less an end to prohibition, like with alcohol. However, we've talked before about, be really careful, particularly coming from a place with liberalized laws in this regard, that, Japan is so far, I would say, behind this. Remember as well, Japan's regulation of marijuana, it didn't regulate marijuana until GHQ came in here. And the story of Japan's regulation of marijuana is a domestic plant. At least hemp is a domestic plant in Japan. It's actually associated with a lot of Shinto religious ceremonies and stuff and whatnot. And it was actually, and not only that, the emperor was the actual patron of the Japanese, Hemp Growers Association. And when GHQ came in after World War II, during World War II, a lot of the planes and clothes and ropes were actually made. Japan didn't have a lot of cotton handy, and they didn't have synthetics because there were petroleum, embargoes on Japan. Those airplanes and ships and everything and clothes were all made from hemp. They were made from huge hemp farms that covered the whole country. And America, under GHQ, was keen to sell American synthetic products to Japan, including rayon and nylon and so on. And it was partly because of that they effectively outlawed the hemp farms. And they did this as part of a law criminalizing marijuana in Japan, criminalizing hemp and all forms of it, including marijuana. Before it was illegal in America, the Americans made it illegal here in Japan. And the law was so strict, and the emperor actually toured the country promising hemp growers that he was going to protect them and make sure that they would be shielded from the bad effects of the law, but the industry got wiped out. That said, you can still drive around in Hokkaido. It grows by the highway. It grows wild in Japan. The stuff, by the way, is hemp. It's not strong. There's not skunk growing around everywhere, but Niigata and Hokkaido, there are still big hemp farms, and there are wild varieties of it in Japan. So it's kind of funny. It was actually not. There's no traditional history in Japan of demonizing. In fact, if anything, it's kind of like an elevated sort of sacred plant in Japan, not for smoking, but for other sort of purposes, although including use in Shinto ceremonies. And it was outlawed by the Americans in Japan. But that law, like a lot of things that Japan has imported, was adopted with a fervor that basically even today, marijuana is seen in Japan as literally crack cocaine, literally like one of the most demonized sort of drugs and presumed hard drug, and not for the harmful effects of it. It's not. There's no public policy assumption. It's more like a religious rule type thing, that taking it is simply breaking the rules in a bad way, in a way that only a devout criminal would ever break. So the stigma against people who don't have the stigma, people use it in Japan. But the consequence, the societal rejection of it, and the consequences criminally, even for small amounts of possession, you can get serious jail time for it in Japan, as well as you can go through some pretty bad stuff. So you should never bring that stuff to Japan. However, it was an interesting challenge for America, for the Japanese Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Justice, when Washington State and Colorado first decriminalized marijuana in America. Ironically, the Americans decriminalizing when they're the ones who criminalized it in Japan. When they started decriminalizing it, the moral panic in Japan immediately became, what about our exchange students? What about our kids that we've sent over to these states studying? They might be... it's the equivalent of, having Americans sending their kids to, France to study, in France legalizing crack, I suppose, during the 1980s, when there was like this huge hysteria about it. It would be something like that. So basically, the Japanese consulate was sending emails to everybody in those cities, as they're doing right now to New Jersey, reminding Japanese citizens, and not just Japanese citizens, by the way, but even residents of Japan. Like if you're a permanent resident of Japan, or even a working visa person in Japan, technically under the Japanese criminal code, there's no geographic restriction. If they find out that you have used marijuana or possessed marijuana, even while in a different country where it was legal, this is what the email says, is that you can face criminal prosecution in Japan just the same as if you'd done it in Japan. So even if you think it's legal, don't get into the wacky tobacco. You are going to get into trouble here in Japan. We will hunt you down and arrest you, even if if you're in a place where it's legal. They sent this out the moment that it was legalized in New Jersey and New York. So going really hard after this. I mean, it's kind of crazy. You think about that, how many Japanese go to Macau for gambling, which is illegal in Japan. But do you think that the Japanese consulate in Macau warns people that if you guys gamble here when you go back to Japan, we're going to arrest you? You think about the drinking age, which is actually very similar to this. And Japanese look at it a similar way. They look at the idea of, in New Zealand, when they think of a bar selling alcohol to someone underage, they think that it's a problem where the bar is violating its license. Whereas in Japan, they think of it as the 19-year-old who's underage breaking the law by drinking before they're legally allowed to do it. And so they're criminals, and yet there's the idea that they don't warn people in Germany, that where you can legally drink, I think it's 16 or something like that, they don't warn them like this. But when New York legalizes marijuana, they actually send threatening notes to all the Japanese residents of New York saying, don't you join this into prohibition still applies to you. Imagine Utah sending emails to missionaries around the world saying don't drink coffee just because you're in Brazil. It's like that. So it's kind of crazy, and it kind of, I mean, look, to me it is ridiculous. Particularly now, it doesn't work. We have the federal government actually still treating in America, still treating marijuana completely inconsistently with how the states do it, and all the problems that creates. It's one of these things as well that while I'm okay with decriminalization of it or legalization of it, but yeah, at the same time, I think that I accept the policy based that everything I understand about it in New Zealand, it's always been widespread before it was mostly decriminalized there. The rationale for criminalizing it when tobacco and alcohol is legal doesn't make sense, So, but like alcohol and tobacco, doesn't mean it's all good, people can actually I don't think it's controversial to say that people can get kind of messed up on it if they overdo it or if they take too much of it, and particularly with the really strong varieties coming out. So I think some people go the opposite way, where they want to argue that it's good, and they when it's illegal, when they're arguing for the legalization, they don't just say it's not that bad. They actually say, oh, this is actually a good thing, like we should be putting it in kids' cereal. I wouldn't go that far. I think it's something you should still be responsible with, but I think it's not something that the government should regulate or treat like a hard drug, and that applies here too. But that said, in Japan, they don't care. It's just illegal stuff. Don't do it. Follow the rules, and they're actually going as far as chasing down Japanese in America where it's legal and saying that we're going to get you. So crazy stuff. So something to bear in mind, and who knows? I mean, this is again maybe America leading the way will force a change in Japan, but we'll see. Off topic, PB, how are things in Middle Earth? I assume you mean New Zealand. Last I heard, I'm watching the rugby, the stadiums are full, there are no COVID cases. The New Zealand are still rolling out vaccinations just slightly faster than Japan, which I think is going to be the next round of stories is going to be about COVID and vaccinations. But hey, they're already got no cases, so what's the rush with the vaccinations? It would be nice, obviously, but New Zealand is like Japan, not a country that produces vaccines, so they're taking their time on that. Sounds okay down there. I mean, it is kind of alarming how, same with Australia, by the way. They found 7 cases in Brisbane and they locked the entire city down. They basically put everyone under home arrest. That's kind of freaky. I'm kind of glad. I mean, as bad as it is here, and as much as the freedom that people have down there is, I envy at the same time. I'm kind of glad that we're not in that crazy. I mean, Japan has just walked this kind of weird tightrope where it hasn't. There are places in America, the red states, where governors are saying don't wear masks anymore, and we'll punish you if you ask people to wear masks and stuff like that. Like, it's not like screw you, we're open. Even if we don't care, even if you get sick. Japan is, but at the same time, it's not locked down either. New Zealand has been kind of harsh lockdown, and it's been really tough down there, but they've got a good result from it. Japan has been kind of like, well, we're not going to lock down, but please everybody just self-police and be responsible, and somehow it's worked here relatively better than a lot of countries in Europe and America, not as good as countries that have been much more forceful, like Taiwan, which has managed it probably the best that I can see, but also Vietnam, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. So yeah, New Zealand looks like it's doing really well, if that's what you meant. It is funny though, I really want to go back to New Zealand. It's one of the things I want to do when we all get our shots and can travel and things can go back to some kind of normal. But I'm increasingly aware that the New Zealand that I know is just so far removed from me now. I've spent more than half my life away from it now. So, but yeah, everything seems to be good in New Zealand. I saw there are lots of comments up here. We've got Brad F. I responded to that earlier. Also, J-Vlog, we've got good night. Andrea Moboy, good night. Have a good night there. Lysander 45, old Soviet joke. Molotov went to Stalin and said, Christ has risen. Stalin responded, I know because the KGB already told me. Yeah. That's actually, I like Russian reversals myself. Those never get old, but that's quite a good one too. PB, any inkling of post-pandemic and post-Olympic economic, political migration reforms, weed, taxes? None on weed. Free condoms for everyone. No, don't really see that. Honestly, I don't see a lot. I mean, Japan is a country that quietly, incrementally changes stuff, and it's definitely done that with the economy and immigration. Political reforms are obviously needed, but, no signs of that, or, so we'll see, but not a lot. The J-Vlog, magic mushrooms were only recently legalized. That's a point I said myself on Twitter. Exactly. This is the thing. While Japan is threatening its own citizens in New York over this, 10 years ago, there were magic mushroom shops in Shibuya, like shops that you could go and buy magic mushrooms. Those were just not regulated. They were not expressly regulated by the criminal code for like a long time. They never got around to it. They are now regulated, of course, but there you go. Oh, Paragotti, 16 for beer and 18 for hard liquors. That's the German drinking age thing, right? That's good to know. I remember in Spain being impressed. I think 12-year-olds can have beers, can drink beer in Spain or something ridiculously. Not actually. I always drank at home as a kid. Dad would let me drink a shandy, make it really, really sort of diluted. But I remember in Spain remembering that there were people drinking beers with Happy Meals, which was, I thought that was actually made some sense, actually, not to stigmatize the stuff so much. Kang and Kodos, your car came with 4 ounces in it from Hokkaido, and you had an S15. Okay, so the Sylvia, right? If you bought a Sylvia from Hokkaido and it had some weed in it, that's not surprising, I suppose, but that is funny, not entirely surprising. I've never, that kind of fits certain stereotypes. Wingstar, good to see Wingstar, and Christopher Luke, good to have you here in the chat, as well as AV84K, good to have you there. I think for island nations it might be easier to isolate for a while. Well, New Zealand is the same size. Well, New Zealand and Japan and UK are the same size. Very different outcomes. I think the population is a big factor. New Zealand, 5 million people, you can actually put all visitors in hotels and you can control it. But when you get to 120 million or 60 million like the UK, and the UK being connected so much with Europe and so on, obviously it's harder to manage. But definitely being islands has contributed to the management of it somewhat. I mean, the flip side of that, of course, and small islands is that you get one case and you can be screwed, and that's the danger for the Pacific. But Anyway, on to the next story. What's happening in Japan around COVID updates? Well, it's getting pretty bad. Osaka yesterday, or on Friday, they were up to 666 cases. I mean, that's just bad in every way possible that it got to that. That was a couple of days ago. But they are spiking. They ended their state of emergency early. They were like, we're so cool. We don't need a lockdown. So that's backfiring. Also, right now it's terrible in Yamagata, Miyagi, and Okinawa. They are right now doing much worse per capita than Tokyo. Tokyo is currently at around, Tokyo is steadily increasing, not going up like that, but it's going up kind of on a steady 20% increase every week, sort of a curve on a steady line. So we're up to about, I think, an average of 390 cases per day, and no sign of getting vaccines for a while. In the midst of this, that guy, the party president of the LDP, not the prime minister, just the person who organizes the party, who I've mentioned before, got a $450,000 donation from the tourism ministry, and based on that, was hell-bent on this ridiculous GoTo travel campaign. And just when we thought that common sense had started to take over and everybody realized what a terrible idea it was, just today, he made a speech saying that we need to restore GoTo travel in the middle of the pandemic spiking again in Japan and cases going crazy. He said, if we live in fear, we'll never get anything done. We need to restart GoTo travel. To which my response is, fear is why we don't put our heads into blenders. Fear serves a purpose if it's something we should legitimately be afraid of. This guy, I mean, Hey, if you ever, I mean, talk about good value for money for a bribe. 450,000 dollar donation, and this person wants to basically condemn Japan in order to secure the votes of the and donations of the tourism industry. I mean, I get it. I want to save the tourism industry too, and I want the free travel vouchers. But how about giving us shots first so that we can do it safely? And once we're vaccinated, go crazy with the GoTo travel. But the idea of promoting it right now, when you have cities actually already now hitting the capacity of their medical systems, and when it was pretty much proven during the last wave, that people traveling from Tokyo and Osaka and cities like that to country towns effectively turn those country towns into huge COVID sites. And this is it. It was even the rural communities that wanted the tourists to come back when they started getting COVID, that they all sort of said, oh, you know what, well, we want tourists to come back, but we don't want tourists with COVID, so we really want to stop everyone from any place that has it, which by that point was everywhere. So in saying that he's basically double dog daring Japan. What are you, Chicken McFly? That was the other thing that popped into my head, the Back to the Future taunt. He's daring Japan to restart active tourism as the pandemic is spiking once again without vaccines being ready. I mean, crazy stuff. That is the first thing that happened. Osaka hitting a remarkable number there in many ways. Latest update on vaccines, by the way, for those asking, we are still in the middle of the rollout for the original 3.7 million medical workers and first responders. That is going slowly and getting slower. They're doing about 40,000 shots per day. They're up to 1.1 million in total, but this is for the Pfizer vaccine, which requires 2 shots. So 1.1 million means 550,000 people. Actually, it doesn't even mean 550,000 people. Most of those people have only had 1 shot. So, they've got to go back and do it again. But the rate has been slowing. The official rollout for the general public, at least for elderly people over 65, starts from April 12th. So basically next Monday, not this Monday, that will start. And there are signs that they are still making preparations for that. A lot of local governments are doing practice runs of it. They've actually secured a whole horse raceway in Shinagawa to be able to do that for en masse in Tokyo. So, they're setting up, right now they're probably using a lot of small medical clinics and whatever for the doctors. They are setting up different infrastructure. So the signs are it won't be at the same speed. The other problem, of course, is securing the supply of vaccines, because Japan is not producing any vaccines at the moment. There are signs that Japanese manufacturers will start producing approved vaccines for COVID-19 from May. Also, Japan has secured both AstraZeneca and Moderna and Pfizer stuff, although they still are looking to approve the AstraZeneca and Moderna, but right now it's just Pfizer. But they reckon that within May they'll have enough supply for the whole country. So after that, it becomes a logistics problem. The general rollout for people like myself won't be starting until after July, and there still isn't a plan for that yet. They're just going to focus on, by July, getting the elderly vaccinated. So we'll see. What is absolutely clear and is now being sort of forcefully put is that vaccines are not going to have any impact on the Olympics. They're not going to be done in time to change the formula on that. And not only that, but right now, given the rapid rate at which in big cities the COVID-19 rate is jumping in Japan, the Olympics are going to take place during the peak of a terrible wave. That seems kind of unavoidable. I imagine they're probably going to use another state of emergency to try to suppress it right before the Olympics. But again, you have to ask, the Olympics are going to be a global super spreader event. People from every country in the world. I mean, 70,000 athletes, and with staff and everything, they're expecting 200,000 is the latest number that I heard. 200,000 people are going to come to Tokyo from all over the world. While Tokyo itself, and they might have vaccines, Tokyo itself, nobody's vaccinated. And it looks like we're going to be in the peak of probably the worst wave that we've had so far. And yet, that is still going ahead. So it is increasingly crazy. But look, I'm just going to lie low. Vaccines should be available in Japan a few months later. And although they are taking longer to come out here, and people are online expressing constant frustration, how did Israel and UK and America get it first? Well, that's easy. They had the vaccines. Japan doesn't. Now, that's the first problem. And on the supply thing, sure, in America they're using the military to roll them out, and it's much better organized. In Japan, the government is doing it through local governments. They're using a very complex distribution system that hasn't started yet. But this is the other thing. So how, if it was up to me, we would have completed the vaccinations 2 years ago, before COVID even started. But of course, the problem was you didn't have COVID and you didn't have the vaccine. So why people are being outraged that Japan hasn't done it yet? That said, I mean, holding the Japan government accountable for getting the vaccines out and distributed, that's fair enough, and no question. The current medical rollout looks slow, and the fact that it's slowing is drawing criticism even from within Japan. But the idea that Japan is screwed up by not having regular people all vaccinated already, I mean, yeah, Japan is slower than EU, but it's slower than the places that already, make the vaccine. So, of course, they're giving it to themselves first. To me, that's understandable. I just criticizing Japan because it doesn't have the vaccine yet is just kind of dumb to me. But we'll see. That said, the test really starts from April 12 when they start doing the mass rollout to 36 million people, and seeing, given how it appears that the medical rollout is behind schedule, they should be much further into the 3.7 million by now than, according to their plan. They're behind plan. And we'll see if it's going to be similarly slow with the elderly, then, that's going to be a real problem. So I'm going to look out for that, but I'm currently okay with things. So that's what's happening with COVID-19. We're coming up on time, so I'm going to push through on the final few stories. Everybody saw the train crash in Taiwan. Terrible thing. The thing which always strikes me about Taiwan, and it's hard to express. I know that there's a perception that, Japan politically, like Japanese people think of World War II and they think of Japan almost like being racist against Chinese. Important to remember. It's not that simple. There's a lot of complex layers to this, but Taiwan, Taiwan is basically like, to Japanese eyes, it is like a place where everybody looks and acts, and the whole landscape, it looks like Japan. They use Japanese sort of infrastructure, like seeing the scene of this accident. It's a Japanese train. People are dressed like Japanese. The TV broadcast in Taiwan looks basically uses the same sort of format as Japanese TV. The roads and the landscape with all the big concrete sort of supports and everything is all Japan civil engineering type stuff. So to Japan, I mean, apart from the superficial, that Taiwan just looks like a clone of Japan where everyone speaks Chinese. There's genuine Taiwan. The tragedy of Taiwan is that Taiwan is like Japan's genuine best friend. If there was another country that Japan could be said maybe other than the United States, and that's a very complicated relationship, but Japan had a relationship of pure love with anywhere in the world. And it's ironic because it has a very similar relationship with Japan that Korea has. Yet it's love. Taiwanese support Japanese baseball teams. I mean, again, not all simple, and don't want to overstate that there's complexity to it. And of course, Japanese rule of Taiwan was not all roses and sing-songs. But they went through a terrible experience when the KMT withdrew from the mainland and retreated onto Taiwan and put Taiwan under occupation. So there are people who, in comparison to what they experienced under mainland, KMT rule after World War II, look fondly upon Japan. And this feeds into the great relationship that Japan has. So whenever Japan has a natural disaster, or Taiwan, which gets earthquakes just the same as Japan, both countries are like the first to respond and the most, enthusiastic to respond with donations and support and rescue teams and whatnot. And to see this case as well, there's been a huge outpouring. Top news in Japan, I mean, it was a terrible, terrible accident. It looks like a truck had a handbrake off or something like that, and it rolled down a hill onto these tracks and caused this. And it's a horrific crash, but it always is, just like we had with the earthquake just even a few weeks ago. That we had another earthquake. Taiwan is always the first to speak up on 3/11. South Korea also pledged support for a short time, but then it immediately became politicized, and the donation group said that they weren't going to provide the money after all, and it always gets horrible over there. But Taiwanese per capita provided the most donations to help with the recovery in Japan, just as Japan does with earthquakes in Taiwan, and with this as well, just seeing the mutual outpouring of support over a tragedy. But it's really nice to see, and it's a great tragedy that Japan has to pretend that Taiwan doesn't exist. Because, of course, Taiwan actually isn't run by a government of Taiwan per se. It's run by, a government of mainland China in exile. That fiction is kind of changing with democracy there now. It is genuinely now people who are only elected in Taiwan. But constitutionally, the Republic of China, the government in Taiwan, of course, claims to be the government of China. And that forces Japan to not be able to recognize it, which is weird, and I do hope within my lifetime, and maybe the situation with China turning up the pressure could go one of two ways, right? It could go very badly, and Taiwan could end up having something probably worse than what Hong Kong is going through, with kind of invasion and forced reintegration with China. Or it could actually force it the other way. If America and Japan actually stand up to help Taiwan maintain independence, then it could actually become an independent country, which would drive China crazy. But right now things are kind of coming to a head around that. But yeah, anyway, it's a terrible crash anyway, and it's everyone in Japan definitely very, very much thinking about the people of Taiwan over that. Speaking of the other China, China's right now seeing Japan buddying up with America, and not quite as forcefully as Europe, talking about the Uyghur genocide and human rights in Hong Kong, but they do speak up on those things. And when they get together and they say that they're talking about this with America, and specifically what they're talking about the most and that they care about most is Chinese incursions into the Senkaku Islands and Japanese territory and so on, which China's claiming is their territory and so on. They're becoming extremely aggressive in tone towards Japan and basically threatening Japan. They don't seem to have caught on that whenever they threaten Taiwan ahead of elections, it always backfires. And same with Japan. The threatening thing, it doesn't work, but that's what they are still doing. A lot of smart people in China. I don't know why the government there thinks that it's a good idea to attack Japan. Japan is, of course, trying to walk a tightrope, however, there, because it does have close ties with China. Another Ben Duncan, good to see you there, and DJ Sunny Side Up, good to see you there. Lo Wang, also good to see you there. Charging on, the UN has called out Japan for its arbitrary, for basically its immigration detention system as having arbitrary detentions, i.e. detention without judicial process. Specifically, there are, Japan rejects nearly all refugee applications, including from Kurds and so on. You ask, how do they end up in Japan? Well, often when people are fleeing for their lives, actually what they do is they get on the first plane that they can get on wherever they are. People don't often deliberately come to Japan, as a refuge destination. In fact, you hear from people that, from the Japan Association of Refugees, they point out that often people are simply desperate to get out of where they are in fear of their lives. And the plane that they are on comes here, rather than deliberately aiming to come to Japan. However, when they come here and they apply for UN refugee status, Japan rejects almost every single case. And then after 2 or 3 years it takes for them to have an appeal and a hearing and so on, when they get through all of that, and if they don't leave, some will leave and go on to other countries, but those who don't leave are placed into immigration detention until they agree to leave. And it is a situation of that, including particularly many Kurdish, Turkish citizens who are basically in unending immigration detention without course for appeal, basically with Japan just leaving them there until they agree to leave somehow. Immigration detention has a number of deaths every year. There's all sorts of problems with the whole system, but the UN calling out Japan for actually having unlawful arbitrary detention. Japan is of course objecting and saying that no, they've got their country rule of law and that they have procedures around this, but this is a really, really ugly area that Japan needs to improve. And again, the fact that the UN is calling them out on it is a good thing. And good videos that I've watched. We're now at the end of the show. It is this video, this series, by the way, Donuts Up to Speed, is one of my favorite series on YouTube. It's been gone for a while now, but they do these sort of deep dives on the history of specific cars. A lot of Japanese cars, like from the 80s and 90s, that I grew up really loving, get featured in this. The first return episode is by a Japanese car modifier called Rocket Bunny, a guy in Kyoto who sort of widens cars like that. But they do little historic things, and they actually did like an animated reenactment of the Gentleman's Agreement meeting in the 1980s, where the Japanese car manufacturers agreed to limit the horsepower of cars to 276 horsepower. And in that meeting, they've got these animated logos of Toyota, Mazda, Honda, and Isuzu and Mitsubishi there. I think it was Mitsubishi there. Anyway, but basically they had all the car makers getting together talking about this agreement that they were going to limit the horsepower on cars. And it was really, really funny. I tweeted about this, that just if you don't watch the whole 25-minute video, just watch the 2-minute skit about the conversation that led to the gentleman's agreement is very, very good. Isuzu, shout out to Isuzu. They used to actually make okay cars, But this whole series is actually really good, and you should watch it. 2.5 Oyajis was back last night, and we're going to do a couple more shows, so it was a lot of fun. If you want to listen to another fun, long conversation, that's what we did last night for an hour. 2.5 Oyajis. Again, yeah, lots of good stuff there. And also big thanks to Erin for doing all the shorts that are cut out of the stories that I talk about in the show, just to make them more watchable and accessible. Really, really appreciate that all the time. Of course, Easter weekend, when you're in Japan, you really don't remember. I mean, to me, Easter is almost like Diwali. You know, it's a place that in Singapore, people take holidays for both Easter and Diwali. You know, it's kind of funny, you know, if you go to church, you know, and you take it as a, you know, serious religious vacation, you know, absolutely have a good Easter weekend. If you live lucky enough to live in a country that it's just a long week, it's a holiday, congrats on getting the holiday as well. That's definitely the case in New Zealand and Australia and Singapore and other places, I think. So enjoy the long weekend if you have that. Here in Japan, I forgot to buy Easter eggs. I might just go and buy some chocolate. It's always a good excuse. And wherever you are, stay safe again. Of course, situation getting kind of terrible with COVID right now in America and in Europe, just as the vaccinations are coming out. It's going to take longer here. Stay safe, keep cool. I'll be back here next week. I've got nowhere else to go. There will be another 2.5 Oyajis next week. Oh, final thing. I am actually, right before this, I actually just made a theme song, and I'm editing some titles for a series that is going to go on this channel, and it's going to be all in Japanese. It's a recording of a seminar I did with Rochelle Kopp and someone else that she wrote a book with, talking about Japanese for a Japanese audience on how to work with foreigners. So it's in Japanese, but I'm going to put it on this channel. It's a 2.5 hour seminar that I'm going to cut up into like 10 different segments. So I'll make a series out of it. But of course, I have the time to subtitle 2.5 hours of video. So I will turn on auto subtitles, which are getting better. But we'll see how well that works in terms of auto translation. But that will be up. It is, if you understand Japanese, it was a really good night. And I gave my own little speech there on advice to Japanese people. I'm working with foreign employees. So that should hopefully be going up in the next week. I've got it all sort of cut and ready to go. I've just got to do the cool intro song and titles and stuff like that. So I'm editing that right now. Look out for that. Lots of stuff going on. Stay safe, everybody. Remember, like the video if you liked. It helps. And I'll be back next week with hopefully fewer technical issues. But of course, as Ben Duncan said, me saying I've got nowhere else to go, and these are not technical issues. This is real life. That's what life can be like sometimes. Should make a t-shirt out of that. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Love all the comments and interaction. Bob Turner asking, by the way, will Japan open up once the vulnerable are vaccinated? I think it's going to take longer than that. We'll see. It'll be a combination of vaccinations and the actual numbers coming down. But the good news from Israel and UK is that it appears that people who are vaccinated are not only not catching it, but they're also not spreading it, which actually wasn't expected. It was expected that people could be carriers even if they're vaccinated, because it doesn't kill the disease. It just makes you not get the symptoms. But the data from Israel is that actually it could actually really squash the thing. So we'll see. I mean, that's the best outcome, but we'll have to wait and see. The opening up will be based probably on a combination of vaccinations, lack of cases, and probably vaccine passports. Probably you're going to need proof that you've been vaccinated to be able to travel. But you know, I can see all of those things happening hopefully around the end of the year, maybe early next year. But I can't wait to travel. Vaccine for Christmas, ROC 299. I think that's going to be the story. And yeah, Kang and Kodos. Japan is going to have 156 Olympic villages all around Japan. Yes, I think that's insane, but that is exactly what is going to happen. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to say goodnight. We are out. I've already said goodbye 3 times. This is the 3rd time. This is the real time. 3 strikes. I'm going to see you all next week. Have a good week. Remember, follow me on Twitter, like the video, and peace. Boom.